The number of participants is looking pretty stable, so I guess I can get started here. So we acknowledge that we're meeting on the ancestral lands of several First Nations. We recognize the significance of the Dish with One Spoon covenant to this land and offer our respect to our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit neighbors as we strive to strengthen our relationships with them. And start this up again. Seems to be not responding. Indigenous women and girls are 12 times more likely to be murdered or missing than any other women in Canada and 16 times more likely than white women. You can visit the Sparrows Canada website for action that you can take to support the actions to make there be fewer missing and murdered Indigenous women. And that's at www.caroscanada.org. You can follow their links to the missing, murdered Indigenous women's and girls advocacy and action. Nature Guelph connects people with nature and inspires them to celebrate and protect it. We do this through education and action, including our speaker series and our conservation projects. Your membership matters. We are entirely volunteer run, and your membership fees go to supporting our education and conservation initiatives in these programs. More importantly, each individual member adds to a collective voice for nature, so together we have greater impact with our advocacy efforts. You can join us by getting a membership online or by mail. The other ways to give are through our general fund to support the growth and development of the club, our youth education fund, and our conservation and land stewardship fund. You can direct those through Nature Guelph's page on Canada Helps, or you can send us a check directly. Welcome members, friends, family, and visitors. And again, this event is free, but donations are always welcome if you're not a member. We are always looking for volunteers. We need more writers and copy editors. Birdwing is still looking for outing leaders, and we're hopefully going to have hybrid meetings come January, and we really need some people with some tech knowledge to help us out with that. You can watch Nature Guelph's YouTube channel, and you can share your photos using the Guelph Nature Community Facebook page. This is your club, so please let the president or other executive members know how you like to be involved, or if you've got any ideas for things that we can do. Now I'd like to remind you of the Scott Beamer Award, which is a new award we are doing for the first time. Born and raised in Guelph, Scott started attending club meetings when he was a high school student. He was keenly interested in all speakers' subject matters and often approached guest speakers after the presentations to engage in further exploration of the topic. Scott was always a gentle and good-natured presence on field outings. His love of all nature is sadly missed. Scott passed away in July of 2020. Nature Guelph established the Scott Beamer Award in recognition of Scott's contributions and to honor his memory. And with this award, we recognize those who further our mission of connecting people with nature and inspiring them to celebrate and protect it. And the recipient of the first Scott Beamer Award will be the Eden Mills Aramasa River Conservation Association. The association accomplished their goal of naturalizing the opening of the weir at the head of the east branch of the Aramasa River in September of 2020. The weir was impeding the movement of fish and potentially damaging downstream habitats by restricting water flow during the summer. Native plants were rescued and replanted at the site, and volunteers prepared the site for construction. Now, a fully functional, maintenance-free boulder opening connects the upper pond with the lower reaches of the river, maintaining a healthy aquatic habitat and protecting downstream property from increased risk of flooding. The honorable mention for the Scott Beamer Award is Denise Fell for all her work in promoting nature on social media. Eden Mills Conservation Authority Association will be receiving a certificate and a prize of $200. And I know Marilyn from there is in the room, so if she wants to say a word or two, you can go ahead.
Hello there. Hi, this is Marilyn Baxter, and I'm so pleased to be representing the Eden Mills Aramasa Conservation Association, and that we are the very proud winners, the first winners of this award. We finished this project last September, so I guess 14 months from now, previous, and it's functioning beautifully, and we're so proud to have opened up that piece of the Aramasa River so that there's, as we said, nothing impeding the fish and the wildlife from going up and down that channel. Thank you very much for that award. We're thrilled.
Well, congratulations to you and your group, Marilyn.
Thank you.
So I remind, as we do most weeks or most months, that you can help clean up the environment with the watershed cleanup project, which is every time you go on a hike, pick up 2 pieces of garbage, take pictures of them, and you can share your photos of the trash with take2cleanup.com. Upcoming events, next Wednesday will be the Wildflower meeting, doing the similar to today. If any of you are attending the Wildflower meeting and you have a presentation, please let me know that you'll be sharing. You can register for that Zoom event via the registration links on eNews, Facebook, or on the website. And then the next day, Chris Early will be entertaining the Birdwing group with his pictures of all the birds he has seen all over the world. So that's going to be pretty exciting. Chris usually attracts a big crowd, and fortunately with Zoom, we can fit more people into the Zoom room than we can into the Arboretum Center. So I hope there'll be a big turnout for that. Again, registration on eNews, Facebook, or the website. Probably our last social hike of this year will be on Friday. They're going to be hiking from Beaver Meadow Drive past Oran Reed Park and on to the Borealis Grill and Bar. If you haven't been to a social hike before, that's what it is. We hike a little bit of property, chit chat, see what there is, and then have some snacks and conversation later. Because it's an outdoor event and it is COVID, attendance is capped at 15 participants, and you can see on eNews, Facebook, or the website on how to register for that event. And then the Guelph's 55th annual Christmas bird count is underway. It's a great way to participate in avian science and learn a little bit about birds. If you're interested in participating in the Christmas bird count, please visit Nature Guelph's website to find out how to participate. And then this is really, really exciting because we are hoping that in January we'll be back at the Arboretum Center for an in-person presentation of the wonderful world of wasps with Chris Early. This will be, we hope, a hybrid event. So some of you will be at home watching on Zoom, and the rest of you will be at the Arboretum Center seeing the same event. So it's a little technically difficult, but we think we can do it. So that's pretty exciting. So Chris is always a great speaker, and it's going to be really exciting to be, after nearly 2 years, to be back in the same room with each other. COVID protocols will be in place. If you're intending to come, I suggest you show up around 7, because you're going to have to show your proof of vaccination, do a COVID screening questionnaire, and register. So it's going to be a little onerous at the door, but you can see information for that will be coming out shortly on how we're going to be doing that. And then the Wildflower series in January is going to be CSI for botanists. So Jerry Corton from Laurentian University will be talking about how he's become a forensic biologist. So that'll be a little bit different. So I'm going to remind you all to mute your microphones, turn off your videos, and post your questions to chat. And then I'm going to turn it over to Peter, who will be introducing each speaker.
Hi, everybody. We've got 5 presentations tonight, and we're going to order them such that the first 3 actually have to do with the rare sites properties that Nature Guelph members are stewarding in Aramasa. And we're going to start off with Brian Allen, who's been involved with stewarding property, what we call property number 1. So Brian, feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready. And I just remind all the speakers that, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes for questions.
There we go. All right. Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, we can hear you, Brian.
Yes, good. Okay, that's great. I haven't done this before. Thanks, Peter, so much for inviting me to speak about Property One. It's been a delight for us to experience Property One over the last few months. As you mentioned, the Rare Charitable Research Reserve has been acquiring properties along the Aramasa River Conservation Corridor over the last few years. Property One was the first one acquired, I believe, sometime around 2019. And actually, John Prescott is going to talk about Property 2, I believe, following my presentation. This is my partner, Diane. She and I have been visiting the property.
Brian, you're not
Yeah.
you're not actually sharing screen yet.
Oh, sorry. Let me see. Where do I go to share screen here? Let me go back. Oh, here, I think. Is this it? Sorry.
Yeah, right at the bottom, Brian, there's if you put your mouse
Green button
at the right bottom, there's a green button that says share screen.
Green button.
Yeah, just make sure your cursor's over the bottom of and it'll show up. It doesn't show up unless your cursor's down there.
Oh, it's okay. Oh, yes, here we are. Share screen. Okay.
Then you'll have to go to the active window on your desktop. There you go. Perfect.
Are we all set now?
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe I'll make this full size. Okay. Yes, so let me, no, I can't get to the arrow here. Let me minimize that for now. Jumping on me. There we go. So my partner, Diane, we've been visiting the property. We visited in the spring of this year, the early summer, late summer, and a 4th visit in the fall to steward the property. We're delighted to have been asked to steward the property. It's a lovely property, and so I'm quite delighted to share some pictures with you and some stories about the property. One of the responsibilities is to submit a report at the end of each visit to the RARE staff. And I'll say a bit more about that as we go forward. Here's a topographic map of the property. As you can see, it's a very long, skinny property. It's about 35 hectares, and it runs from 7th line, then southwest to the Aramasa River. you can see a little up in the upper right-hand corner, a little notch taken out of the property. That's a lot that was severed. And there is a very large, lovely new house going up there. I think that's part of the trade-off that the rare people made in order to be able to acquire the property, or at least the previous owners, to sever this property off. As you move from the 7th line toward the river, the front part of the property is meadow, and then you'll see moving down a marshy area, a cedar forest with a small stream flowing through it. The trail crosses this stream at one point, and the bridge is actually 2 logs that are secured together, and you walk across the logs to get across the stream. It's an unnamed stream, but it does flow through the summer as well. Moving toward the river, next is a field that was planted in soybeans this year and is leased to a local farmer. And then moving on down, there is a mature mixed forest near the river. It slopes down sharply downhill to the river. The river is marked there in blue. So I'll take you through now with some pictures. This is me in the cedar swamp at the front in the early summer. You can see lots of weeds there, I think goldenrod. We also, one of our responsibilities is to remove garlic mustard and other introduced species. And so we were able to remove a substantial number of garlic mustard on our first visit. They're easy to see when they're in blossom. Buckthorn is another invasive species, introduced invasive species. And when we have the opportunity, we can remove that as well as part of our visit. You can see me here wrestling with a garlic mustard that was putting up quite a fight. I ultimately won that fight, ended up on my butt. This is the slope down the mature mixed forest. You can see that there is an old farm laneway carved into the side of the hillside here. It's a delightful old roadway that was probably created about 100 years ago. A mature white pine. This is back on the east side of the field. We think probably it's in front of an old homestead. There are lilac bushes in behind the white pine. And so at least we suspect that there was an old homestead in that location. I would be curious to hear if anyone knows if that's the case. Okay, this is down close to the river. Actually, the picture was taken in the fall, but those tracks, ATV tracks, were there on our first visit. So another responsibility is to report when there are activities on the property that were unauthorized. Fortunately, I think after the first visit, there were no new ATV tracks. So the rare staff will visit, try to determine who was in the property on the ATV and visit them and ask that they not continue. Another task is to report or remove, if we can, obstacles across the trail that runs through the property. This was our 4th visit again.
Wow.
A large cedar branch came down. This is again quite close to the river. We were able to remove some of the small branches. The rare people provide a set of tools in a locked box that we can use, including a saw. But of course, some of this is too large, and we would report that this branch was in the way, and they would come in and remove it later with a chainsaw. Okay, this is there is a test at the end of this presentation, and this is the first question. What is this, or what created this tube? It's about 4 to 6 inches tall, just to give you some idea of the size, and down very close to the river as well, in a very wet, muddy area. Okay, so first question, what is that? Or what created that? Another really nice feature of a mature forest that has not been altered recently are the old decaying logs. This one we would guess is several decades old. A great habitat for invertebrates and a carbon sink as well. And the standing dead trees provide food for birds. Whoops, jumping again. Okay, I think you recognize this, an iconic Canadian mammal. We spotted about probably 25 feet up in a tree. Maybe it's a poplar tree. On probably our 2nd visit. And oops, keeps jumping on me. And evidence of another iconic Canadian mammal, again, of course, quite close to the river. Okay, lady slipper. This was on that farm laneway that carves its way down the steep slope in the mature forest to the west. A member of the orchid family. And this one we had some trouble identifying. We think we've got it. It's we think Polygala, or also known as gay wings, and it was very close to the lady slipper. Again on that, just on the edge of that roadway. A feather, large feather. We found this on our last visit as well. This is about, I think, about 10 inches long. It's a large feather. And so this is the 2nd question on the quiz. What species of bird left this feather? We have some thoughts, but we're not too sure. Okay. More species that feed on dead logs. White fungus and a yellow fungus. I'm not sure what they're called. And a large slug. This slug is about 2 inches long. So, and again, down very close to the river. And there's an individual watching very, very carefully, a resident of the river watching us very carefully. Okay. Okay, so that's the pictures from the property. I wanted to just, if I've got a couple minutes, share this book with you. So I'm not sure whether this is something that everybody has seen at some point or not. It was written in 1911, published in 1911, professor at Cornell University. And it's written for primary school teachers. So provides case studies that they can use. It covers animals, plants, insects, geology, and astronomy. So it's a delightful book, a very large book. So there are hundreds of case studies in this. And so anyway, I'd be curious then to know whether you are aware of that book as well. And I'll stop at this point. Now, do I stop share at this point or not?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can stop share. Yeah, Peter, you got that? Peter, are you going to do the chat questions?
Sure, I can do that. So we've got, let's see. So Nina has guessed that that's a crayfish that created that hole. Is that right?
So now, but I asked Judy the other night, and she confirmed that it was probably, it's a terrestrial crayfish, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've got a couple guesses. Nina and Eva think that's a turkey, wild turkey feather.
Oh, okay, that was our guess as well. That was our guess, but we appreciate it being confirmed.
Yeah, and then the yellow fungus, Judy thinks is witch's butter, maybe witch's butter.
Okay. Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that slug is a western dusky slug. That's one of the most common slugs that we have around here.
Okay.
And Marilyn believes that the blue flower is a fringed polygala.
Yes. Okay. And that we kind of, actually, we went to the library and did some research and managed to find that in one of the books in the library.
Nice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Brian. We appreciate that. And next we're going to have John Prescott, and John's a steward of property too. So this is the more recent acquisition that was made by Rare Sites. And so John, anytime, feel free to share your screen. At the bottom there, if you just move your cursor over, it should show up. The green button should show up.
Okay. Can you see my screen here?
Yeah. All we have to do is you just need to get to your presentation.
Yes, I'm trying to. Okay, here we go. It's not letting me get on the guest list. Sorry.
So
There it is.
often,
Yeah.
Often, John, if you, are you there? If you have your presentation in an active window, the open window, it'll you'll find it a lot better.
Should be. Oh, sorry. Oh, here we go. See it now? You see it now?
Yes, it's showing up. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was clicking the wrong
No
button.
problem.
So, and you can hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
You can hear. So, yeah, this will be a very brief talk about property 2. As Brian said, Rare has been acquiring property on what they call Aramasa River Conservation Corridor, and the bottom left-hand one here is property 1. This is property 2, which I'll talk about in detail, and this is the third property they acquired, the Edgewood Camp, which is just on the edge of Eden Mills. Some of the land was sparked for development by the owners, who then made an eco-gift of the remainder of the camp. And there's a fourth part in the area which is just about to be co-gifted to rare. And as we were told, Nature Guelph made a contribution, particularly to property one, help we raised $30,000 more towards that, and we made I think about a $4,000 contribution to property two. And I believe there are other properties in the area that are going to be land trusted to rare, so that they will be protected. Property two is easy to access, is publicly accessible, whereas the property one that Brian talked about isn't publicly accessible. Rare have said if Nature Guelph wants a field trip there, they'd be very happy to arrange one. But currently, members of the public can't go into property one, I think, but they can in property two. Property two is easy to access. It's very close to the Presbyterian Church, Eden Mills. So if you go down Highway 29 from Highway 24, if you go down 29 and then sort of the turning into towards Eden Mills, which is this in the middle, you sort of turn left and then go out down into Eden Mills. The Presbyterian Church is, it's there. Presbyterian Church is just on the edge of that, the turning. And then what you want is here, it's on the turn, and there's a gate there. It's about a 50-acre property. It takes about 45-50 minutes to walk down to the end. It's nice property. I've been visiting there once a month at least to help to steward it and to look at birds. So this is the property. So this is 29 here. There's the turning for Eden Mills Church, Presbyterian Church just here. And then the trail runs along a kind of an escarpment where there's sort of limestone cliff, which I'll show you, small limestone cliffs all the way along here, and then it runs down to the river. Most of the property is almost inaccessible cedar bush, but I want to access it soon. We looked at it a couple of years ago with rare. It's got some beautiful cedar ferns in there, which I want to have a look at. But most of what I've been doing is walking along the trail here, because I've been birding, and that's the trail they asked us to look at. This is the Aramasa River running through the property. Rare owned a bit of the property on the other side of the river, which I haven't waited over to have a look at. That's the problem. It's reasonably accessible. The trails aren't fantastic. They can be quite muddy and wet in the fall and spring, but it's been a real joy to walk through it over the course of a year and to see the different seasons. And I've just sort of got some random photographs from let's say the same season. And again, this is on the top part of the escarpment. You can see a bit of the limestone cliff. Here, this is probably July or so fairly thick grass. And if you follow the trail down from the road, you'll be actually at Fox, and I'll show you where part of it runs down to the river, which is the bit I've been mostly following because that's what we were asked to bird along. But it also forks off the right at a particular spot, close as you're getting closer to the river. And that fork to the right hooks up with the radial trail, which eventually runs to Watson Road. I haven't ventured along that, but at some stage I'll try to sort of walk, as some people do, walk along the river. I've walked down to the river, and Brian said there's a lot of buckthorn which is a view. The trail is a bit odd in places, but it's not bad. I would say if you're unsteady on your feet, you probably need to be slightly careful. But if reasonably active, it's fine. And this is the section which goes down to the river. That if you walk along here a little bit further, the trail forks to the right or to the left. The left goes down to the river, and it's almost like a meadow area with lots of sort of song sparrows, goldfinches, and so on. In the fall, I tried walking through it, and it almost disappeared up to over my head in just a huge amount of grasses and vegetation. So I won't do that again that time of year. And as I've enjoyed the changing season, so it's nice. It's this place to sort of discover and at different times. So again, this is the bit going the meadow type area down to the river, and then if you go down there, small cabins which are being demolished, and the river is great. Depending on the season, it's so high and low. There's types of duck there, and herons and kingfisher and so on. And again, you see it in different seasons. There's some volunteer opportunities. I've been involved in bird migration monitoring, so I've been going every second week during the spring and fall migration, and we report on eBird. So there's eBird as its site, is a spot, a rare, most corridor property too, that you can report on or you can look at to see what's around. We've currently documented 79 species since, I think, March of this year. It's not as many as 132 species of birds in property 1. But I really want to get into some of that deep cedar habitat to see what's in there, but there isn't a trail at the moment, so it'd be a bit of bushwhacking. As Brian says, there's also volunteered stewardship activity, which he and his partner are doing on property 1. I'm part of a group which visits once a month, so I take 1 week a month to visit, to look at structures and usage and dogs and camping and so on, as Brian talked about. And one of the activities we're supposed to do is to report 3 or 4 nature items each time on iNaturalist. So if you take a picture of a plant or an insect or frog or slug or fungus, you can report it to iNaturalist, and if you're lucky, you'll get a report back saying whatever the thing taken photograph of is. And the advantage is that then gets sort of reported into the rare database, which is why they use iNaturalist. So over time, if there are enough stewards in there and enough people taking pictures and reporting, then they would be able to build up a reasonable inventory. But I think there's a huge amount of work to be done inventorying the different types of nature that there are there. And Brian, I really like Seek. Seek is a wonderful way to use an iPhone or a smartphone to identify different items in nature. The disadvantage is it doesn't report it to anybody. It just reports it to you, which is, I think, why I like iNaturalist. And there are other opportunities for to be on the rare sites board. I've been on it for about 3 years. I find it absolutely fascinating group to be part of, because they spend time trying to identify conservation areas and trying to sort of deal with issues around acquisition land. If anybody is interested in this topic, I'm happy to pass the job on to them. It's a really interesting group of people to belong to, a very interesting topic. But there are, as said Stuart, opportunities with other properties in the area, including Edgewood, and it's a fairly straightforward. And at some stage, I think there will be opportunities for work parties and destruction of small cabins and things like that on property too. And if people are interested, let me know. So if there is a kind of work opportunity, I can get in touch with you. So it's a nice property. It's a nice sort of 45-50 minute walk. We would do more if you want. It's publicly accessible. It's easy to get to. Park behind Presbyterian Church unless it's Sunday, or along the road. I think there's lots to be discovered in this site in terms of nature. So that's my brief kind of overview of property 2, and I just encourage you to check it out. It's a nice walk if you want to walk on a summer's day or other time, except when it's really rainy. Thank you.
Thanks, John. We have a couple questions in the chat, and Judy asked, well, I think you answered this though, is we're still looking for more volunteers to steward or monitor for birds. So anyone interested to contact John?
Yes, yeah, sure.
And then Dave Beaton has asked, is there any moves by Rare to secure the downstream property to connect the trail to the back of the Smith property loop?
Dave, not that I'm aware of at all. But I mean, we can, if you talk about that, I'll try to find out more. I'm not aware of that. I know there are property owners who, I can't remember what the term is, but conserve land and make sure that the land they own goes into trust, so it can't be developed in particular ways. But I'm not aware of any work at the moment to acquire additional properties in the area. There always is an e-gifts, which involves working with the federal government to give a tax receipt for the value of the gift.
All right, well, thanks, John. So if you can stop sharing now.
Yes, give me a second. Okay, stop.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Our next presentation is going to be by Marilyn White, and she's going to show us some of her bird photography that she's been taking on property number 1. So Marilyn, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen.
Okay. Slideshow. Okay, can you see the slides? It should be called
Yes.
Rare Birds.
Yep.
Okay, sounds good. So thanks for the opportunity to share, Glenn, and my personal experience with birding at the Rare Aramasa 1 site. It's really helped my husband and me cope with the pandemic, being able to get out and get some fresh air and enjoyment doing something we really enjoy, and that's birding and photography. It's not a good coincidence though, but our bird monitoring at the Aramasa 1 site and the pandemic started at the same time. So that's not something good, but it's helped us to cope with the pandemic. And similar to what Bruce was saying, I have this map here on the property. Property 1 with the Aramasa Conservation Corridor was purchased in 2019. It consists of 87 acres of land near Everton, which is east of Rockwood. It has multiple habitats, which has mentioned before. There's a meadow, a cedar swamp, and then there's a hay meadow and high quality mixed forests. And it's also contains a provincially significant wetland. So starting in 2020, my husband Glenn and I joined as one of two groups of bird monitors doing alternate weeks in spring and fall to catch the bird migration and see who stays in the area and doesn't move on. And the hike, you've heard from both people doing presentations, can be challenging. The trails are not really marked that well, and access to property one is controlled by RARE, so you need permission to access it. But it's a great hike, and you definitely get a good workout while looking for birds. And there are several different habitats as outlined in the map, starting from the road and culminating down at the Aramasa River. So we'll start with the Wildflower Meadow. And it's a fallow wildflower and grasses meadow where our birding begins just after we park the car. So every time we went to do bird monitoring, we were greeted by song sparrows, both coming and going. And you just had to look for the highest mullein seed head, and you would almost always find one singing there. But however, it is one of the more common sparrows found in the area. And so this species could be found throughout the property. And we've also had sightings of an endangered bobolink species. We usually only identify these by call. And it was quite exciting for us to see a pair, or what appeared to be a pair. And growing up on a farm just one line west of the rare site, I saw the species all the time in our fields. And so their numbers have declined dramatically. So it was exciting to see them, and hopefully increasing in number as a result of these protected lands. Okay, oops, that's too far. Okay, yeah. So this area, the Wildflower Meadow, has also been a great area for sparrows, such as the more common white-throated sparrow. They love the seeds from the various wildflowers, and during fall migration, they are quite common in this area. It's also a great area for warblers. This is a Cape May warbler in fall plumage, and it was in a small flock of yellow rump warblers, both of which were in fall plumage. So it makes it very difficult to identify them. But I take the photographs, and it helps us confirm some of the identifications after the fact, since we had originally identified this one as a yellow rumped warbler. But when we got took a second look at the pictures, we realized it was different. So this is the Cape May warbler, and this is the yellow rumped warbler, which looks very similar. When we leave the wildlife meadow, or the Wildflower Meadow, we go into the wet meadow and mixed cedar swamp. And it's just a short walk that you can, short walk diversion, which takes you into the open wet area. And here we had just entered the wet meadow when we literally had common yellowthroats flying circles around us, challenging us as we entered their territory. And we were spinning in circles trying to keep up with their frenetic flight. They're such an energetic little warbler that they're just a joy to see. We've also had alder flycatchers perched atop the scrub willows in the swampy area. And we experienced quite a few of these in 2020, which was the first year of monitoring. But for this year, for some reason, we're not sure why, we didn't see very many of these. And here is the black-billed cuckoo. It favored the tamaracks on the edge of the wetland. And this was a rare sighting for us. We've only seen one cuckoo, and that was in 2020. Normally, indigo buntings could be seen in a number of locations within property one, but usually they were high up in the trees and very difficult to see. However, in the wetland areas, we've seen them right at eye level, erupting into full song. And the color of this bird is truly an amazing. It isn't as intense as it is in this photo. Other visitors to the swampy area are this is a bay-breasted warbler. And it would come into the nearest shrub to check us out. It's a very nondescript bird in fall plumage, and again, identification was confirmed through the photos that I take. There is a Blackburnian warbler and a one other warbler that is very similar, Blackpoll. So both the same bird in both photos. And what better place than the wetlands to find the swamp sparrow? We initially had this identified as a white-throated sparrow, but it came so close that it gave us time to revise our identification and to take pictures for later confirmation. The benefit of one of the reasons I decided to take my camera and record the species we encountered. It has proven to be beneficial to improving the accuracy of our bird monitoring. And it's also a credit to eBird that they have a very talented reviewer that confirms the species identification on the submitted eBird lists. The reviewer for Aramasa is Dan McNeil, and his efforts have assured more accurate monitoring. And we find that the photos help him do that. So he does all of Wellington County. And so Aramasa 1 is included in that region. And the agricultural field, as Bruce was saying, was a soya field this year. The first year it was a cornfield, and trying to walk through or around the 6-foot-high corn field or the densely planted soya crops and still try to stay upright, I think was a challenge to finding the birds in this area. And the open field can be a cruel thing, like in this late winter snow or spring snow storm that we had in May 2020. The large tree in the background was the one that Bruce was talking about as being the mature white pine on the property.
The corn.
And yeah, the corn is yet to be planted. However, on that edge of the field where our backs are pointing, we had a very lovely little warbler, a morning warbler, and it was found right at the break between the forest and the fields. And it appeared in this same area on several trips that we made back to the site. So we were almost confident that it was breeding or nesting and breeding in this area. And as I said, we had a couple of events where it appeared. And in fact, the spring of this year, whether it was the same bird or not, we had another sighting that was within only 100 meters of the previous year. And this bird never stopped moving. My husband really credits the photos that I take with increasing our reporting accuracy. Seeing the species was a highlight for us. It's a very beautiful warbler.
And never stopped.
Yeah, never stopped moving. So other species that appear in the transition between the forest and the field are such birds as the redstart, which was and the aptly named black and white warbler. Although the black and white warbler could be seen regularly throughout our monitoring area, they seem to be very curious and quite often come down to our level to investigate. One of the signs of breeding is the bird singing in the spring, and this one is obviously singing. And I had to chuckle at this picture when I got around to processing it. If you can see that the butts of the black and white warbler is quite a work of art. It's quite waffled and very pretty. Another species that we found in this transition area was the black-throated green warbler, as well as the Canada warbler. And we had plenty of time to get a good look at these and enjoy their presence in property 1. It's also a good location for migrating fall sparrows, such as the fox sparrow. The reddish coloration and the large size of this sparrow really leads to a quick identification. They're not as easy to see. They usually are in low undergrowth flitting around, but with a little patience, they will come out long enough for you to get a good look. And it's such a beautiful sparrow. Coloration is quite intense. And another species that we've seen in the fence rows, or the trees along the fence row, we often see common raptors flying overhead, but this Merlin usually was seen perched on the treetops, and it was present in several of our visits. It's a small falcon that was, I guess, just hanging out in the area. So what happens when you hear a song and you know you haven't heard it before, you can't identify? And this was the case in 2020. Luckily, my husband had the presence of mind to record it on the iPhone. And again, we can't say enough about having a talented reviewer in Dan McNeil. He took the recording and he was able to identify the bird as a white-eyed vireo, which turned out to be only the 3rd time it had been reported in Wellington County. Unfortunately, it didn't stick around for a photo. And song is a very important means of identifying birds because a lot of them you never do see. And there's no mistaking the scolding of the house wren when you enter its territory. They give ample opportunity to get photos as they chatter away. I love this little bird. It is inquisitive and bold and poses often for photos. In some instances, you get very regal poses of it on beautiful locations. It's quite a lovely bird. A lot of bird watchers don't really appreciate the house wren because it can be quite aggressive and take over territory for other birds. And one of the more difficult birds we've had to find is the golden-crowned kinglet. It has been called the hearing aid bird since its call is so high-pitched it generally goes undetected by those of us whose hearing isn't what it used to be. And it's a very tiny bird and often flits around at the top of trees, and it's full of energy and doesn't stop moving. And by comparison, there's no mistaking the raucous call of the northern flicker. It's one of the more common woodpeckers we've seen at Aramasa 1. And I find photos a great way of identifying birds after the sighting, and for those that aren't quite sure of their identification. It wasn't until we looked at the back of the camera and reviewed the photos after it flew that we identified this bird as a northern parula. And photos can also be helpful in confirming the fall colored warblers. They never stay around long enough for you to get all of the field marks. In this case, the yellow rump warbler. It's a beautiful seed head of a goldenrod that is in the front meadow in the fall. We've also had rusty blackbirds, and we were really excited to see these in the fall of 2020. But again, for some reason, we didn't see them this year. The red-eyed vireo is one of the more common birds encountered when monitoring. They are very often heard but not seen. And unless, of course, you are scolding the monitoring bird watchers like this one, check out the awesome hairdo on this one as he shows off his spiky hairdo. And then there are the very obvious, beautifully colored birds. The Scarlet Tannager in this photo is a bold and unmistakable bird. We saw the intense blue of the Indigo Bunting earlier, and the Scarlet Tannager definitely challenges for the winner of the most colorful award. The red is just an intensive red. And then there's the bright yellow of the yellow warbler is something to see as well. The species was quite common at Aramasa 1. Then we move on to the mixed bush that leads down to the Aramasa River. And it's quite, like it was Bruce had been saying, it's quite a drop as you walk from the bush down into the river valley. And here are two crazy birders in the Aramasa River enjoying numbers of species while standing in the water. And in some instances, the river's edge buzzed with activity. We always wore knee-high rubber boots while on the hike because the land is quite wet. And one of our friends would join us so that she could practice her bird watching skills. So some of the common birds that we had along the river was the rose-breasted grosbeak. We saw that just about every time we did the monitoring. And another bird that we were quite happy to see is the northern water thrush, which is not a thrush at all, but a warbler. And this species is often difficult to see as they skulk around in the shrubbery. And the small warbler was a constant presence in the spring along the river. And we had repeated encounters with this bird, leading us to think it was breeding in the area. And fortunately, one flew right above our heads and we were able to get a reasonable picture of this warbler. Other common visitors along the river were the cedar waxwings. And I think there was only one instance where we got down to the river and we did not see them up at the top of the trees. The yellow rump warbler I've mentioned a number of times in the presentation, and it was a common inhabitant of the shrubbery along the river. And here the male in spring plumage, which is much easier to identify than the one in the fall, which is in this picture. And we took photos and we identified this when we looked at the photos later. And I credit, I have a Nikon camera with a 400mm lens, and I credit that piece of equipment with bringing these birds so much closer so that we had a chance to identify the birds through the field marks. This particular warbler, a palm warbler, was also seen along the water's edge, and it's definitely not this big. It's quite a small bird, and it flew very close to us and posed on the driftwood, and just made for a perfect photograph. And here is another woodland warbler we seldom see, the ovenbird. Most times we identify it by the call because it is so secretive. And some of the more difficult birds to identify have been the thrushes. Since they very seldom see them, they're often identified by song only. Again, photos really help with identifying these birds. And when you get it wrong, eBird reviewers like Dan McNeil come to our rescue. And here a hermit thrush based on the reddish tail feathers. Here a veery, which is very well hidden, very difficult to see. And you've heard John and talk about the eBird list that we report the birds found on the site through eBird, and it allows Rare to build a comprehensive list of what they found at their sites. And it gives them a better understanding of what their efforts are accomplishing. eBird is such a valuable tool in monitoring bird populations. As we walk, Glenn would fill in the eBird list on his phone, and we both took binoculars, and although I use my camera mostly. So we hope to continue volunteering as bird monitors. And this is a summary of the species that we've seen. Jenna Quinn at Rare compiles this list of species. And I think at this one site this year, we had 105 species. And so it's an opportunity to learn bird identification and do something outdoors that is enjoyable. Volunteering for Rare has been very enjoyable. So we'd like to continue. And I talked about Jenna Quinn, so I have put her contact information up so that if you are interested in doing any volunteering, I believe there's still a fair bit of volunteering possibilities, that you can contact her and find out what's available so that if you're interested in joining. So that's it for my presentation, and I hope you've enjoyed the bird photos, and I can take any questions if you're interested.
Thanks, Marilyn. Those were amazing photos.
Thank
Just
you.
awesome. We've got a couple comments. Marilyn Baxter just wanted to say they were wonderful photos, and Eva wanted to comment comment on your photography, said they're great. And of course, they're just amazing. And then Nina was just asking what photo equipment you use, and you already, I think, answered that because you use a Nikon. And so most of those were taken with a 400mm lens.
Yeah, I have a Nikon D500 and then a 400mm lens, 100 to 400mm lens.
Nice.
Most of the time I'm shooting at 400.
And Marilyn Baxter's just commented that the Emerca project that she was involved with, that they won the award for, which is the Eden Mills Aramasa River. What's the CA? I can't remember the CA, but it's located. Yeah.
Conservation
So-
Association.
The Conservation Association is located at the northern tip of the property in Eden Mills, and it's to be soon acquired by Rare. It's called the Simon property.
Oh, good.
So yeah, which is amazing. That's really good news. Brian Allen wanted to know where he could get a copy of the map. And
Oh,
don't
I
know if
got
you
that
know.
from Jenna Quinn.
So
I-
Brian, you can just, contact Jenna directly.
Yeah, and she sends it as a JPEG, so it just fit right into the presentation.
Nice. And
Okay, thank you.
yeah, and John also wanted to congratulate you on your photography. He said wonderful photos combined with great eyesight and your ability to spot movement. And I really appreciate those because I love doing bird photography too. And I appreciate any photo of a kinglet because I cannot get a good photo of a kinglet
They're
anyway.
usually so high up in the tree. You
I
can't.
know. And then if they're down, they're all over the place, right? They never stay
Yeah.
still.
No,
So if you can stop sharing now,
sure.
we'll go to our next presentation. And our next presentation is going to be from Bonnie and Bruce Weaver. And I'm not sure we should even let them talk because their talk isn't about an area along the Aramasa River. It's in Morocco. But anyway, we are going to let them talk. So Bonnie and Bruce, if you want to share your screen, it's exciting. I'm excited to see your photos from Morocco. Excellent. So we can see your screen and everything. So I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, let me just, well, we'll see what happens. I forgot to check in the bottom corner, so we'll see. This was a tour that Bonnie and I did with one guide and a driver, well, two drivers, starting on the 9th and going until the 19th of this past month. Javier, our guide, called it From the Atlantic to the Sahara. So I was quite happy with that. The red shows the route we took from Marrakesh, our starting and ending point, moving through the high Atlas Mountains, down to a reservoir outside Ouarzazate, and then through this region out to Merzouga, where the very beginnings of the Sahara are seen in very high sand dunes. We returned by a southern route through a UNESCO World Heritage Site at Benadou and ended at the coast at Agadir, where we went south one day, north the second day, and then returned to Marrakesh. From Marrakesh on the second to last day, we took a little tour into the high Atlas Mountains to a ski resort. Not quite open, not much snow, but we were up about 2,700 meters, so to get some of the high altitude birds. One of the delights was stopping along the roadside for raptors. And we did, Javier warned us that we wouldn't see very many raptors but almost daily we had long-legged buzzard and this beautiful Bonelli's eagle. Uh, Two sightings, once with the adult and once with the juvenile. This is the pass through the high Atlas Mountains. A little reminiscent, the roads were of parts of BC with switchbacks, a reasonable asphalt road, not terribly wide, but a comfortable drive at high altitudes. This was one of the major passes. In fact, the whole route is called the Tees Chica route through the Atlas. On the other side of the Atlas, the southeast side, we found some farmland, one of the few places where there was greenery. And in the greenery were pomegranates. And where there's wetland, there's herons. This is the gray heron, a migrant from Europe. And the yellow wagtail. But I said it was dry, and it was very, very dry. This is just on the edge of a reservoir that served Ouarzazate and region. And you can see how low the water level is. Those are markers for places where water outtake pipes for agriculture are located. But in and around the mud flats, we found shelduck and teal and one marbled teal, which was a real delight, a first for us. As we moved into the stony desert called the High Plain, the soil was red, very desolate, very dry, home to the fulvous babbler. And this little critter has to have the oddest name. It's known as the fat sand rat. And he doesn't look to be that chubby, but that's his name. Again, just to give you an idea of some of the roads, we're very fortunate to have a 4x4. We got into this region of gravel desert, and it's known as the Tagdilt Track, and also known as the Valley of Birds. And it was the prime birding, one of several prime birding locations. And when they said the Tagdilt Track, they really meant tracks. I don't know how our driver decided which set of ruts to follow, but we always managed to get back to the main highway. A relative of the horned lark. Again, dry, desert. As we got closer to the sand deserts, we found these desert gourds. Just a couple of locations. I didn't realize there were so many larks, and trying to differentiate was quite a challenge. This guy was a little easier with that thick bill. Even in flight, you could pick up that heavy bill. The male and female white-crowned wheatear. I think they were 17 of the days we saw this bird. Our first glimpse of the sand dunes at Merzuga. These dunes were right up to the hotel. In the hotel, we had a regular supper hour visitor. There were several trident bats that flew back and forth around the around the dining room table. So Javier was able to capture this lovely shot. And as I said, the dunes came right up to the hotel. I'm not sure if you're getting the sound, but these are sand grouse. And Javier was able to get the sound as these birds came in several large flocks to a very small water hole. They really fluff up. This is the crowned with the black bar. They hold their beaks up and water dribbles into their gizzard, and they can go from sunrise when they come to the water hole until sunset when they take a second drink for overnight. We had very large flocks of two species, spotted as well. You get just a little glimpse of the water hole. The sand desert provided us with a variety of wheatears and different larks. And these very odd warblers, group of them, including the spectacled, the desert, and tristrums. We stopped at a Berber tent encampment because they were known to feed desert sparrows, one of our target birds. They were indeed feeding them. We did get a glimpse of a couple of birds. Shortly after we left their encampment, we came upon two flocks of over 30. Absolutely gorgeous sparrow. Sometimes trees just demand to be photographed. A real oddity was this hoopoe lark. Notice the size of the bill and those very, very long legs. A bird that preferred to run rather than fly. And here's Tristram's, I think one of my favorite little birds of the trip. That with that white eye ring. Brown-necked ravens. There were also common ravens, but the brown necks were identifiable at a distance once you got used to checking just in this area. Not as glossy as the black on the rest of their body. Subtle, but there. This was one of those interesting moments when our driver and our guide are discussing which is the right set of tracks to follow to find Pharaoh's eagle owl. And after a bit of discussion, they said, well, let's try that route. Set up, and it's usually somewhere up there. So careful scanning. And after half an hour, there was a lump that looked about right. And sure enough, it's a relative of the great horned owl, but about 2/3 the size and much buffier. Fits right in with that sandstone. We found 3 different eagle owls over the trip, always on high rocky cliffs like the last one. Bonnie enjoyed the Todra Gorge. Very narrow, very high, difficult lighting. We don't really get the blueness of this blue rock thrush, who was right on the side of the road. Very convenient for us. And then we moved on to Benadou, a UNESCO site. Some of you will know it more for Game of Thrones and The Gladiator. I'll remember it for House Buntings. This is perched just outside one of the windows in our hotel. We toured Ben Haddou for part of a morning and found some good birds just on the outskirts of the UNESCO site. I said we had many of these birds, but not too often close enough to get a shot of them. And finally, we reached Agadir, and just south of Agadir at a river mouth, we found greater flamingos, along with a number of the common European waders like red shank, green shank. But I was intrigued by the Maghreb magpie. The little blue patch behind the ear is bare skin. The highlight for our guide and for us were these northern Baldivas. He reminded us that 20 years ago there were 30 breeding pairs in the world. On that first day, we saw almost 200 birds. On the second day, another 150, about 100 kilometers further north. So in 2 days, we saw a third of the world's northern ibises. In amongst the ibis were some stone curlews, also known as thick-knees, a very, very cryptic bird. There were over a dozen in a field, and these two were about the only shot I could find where they showed up well enough. A trip south of Agadir took us to a national park, the Sus Massa, where we found a number of great gray shrikes. And our guide Javier took the time to point out the subtle differences between the common white wagtail and the Moroccan subspecies. It's all in the head. North of Agadir, we took a lunch break or a mid-morning break and saw this fishing vessel quite far out on the Atlantic. And as we watched, we were able to spot a couple of skuas, Pomeranian Jaeger, and a shearwater, probably Corys. But no photographs, they were really far out. On the sandy coast, we came across another lark, and this beautiful redstart, male and female. Clementines on their way to market. Just had to throw that in as a reminder of one of Morocco's famous exports. This bird we did have every day of the trip, an early morning alarm clock. That second to the last day, climbing into the high Atlas Mountains to go to a valley. The valley itself was at 2,700 meters. And you can see the road we had come up to get into the valley. Along the way, this ground squirrel entertained us for a bit. We had the two choughs, the red-billed and then the alpine or yellow-billed chough. This one had something wrong with its bill. And we're going to say that's all, folks. That's the end. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Bruce and Bonnie. That's amazing. I really want to go back to Morocco. I only saw a small part of it, but your photos made me really, really want to go back. Does anyone have any questions? We don't have any questions in the chat, but does anyone have any questions? Just turn on your mic and ask it. All right, well, if we don't have any,
May I just
if
say,
you-
Peter, that was the end of a trip to France to see our daughter and family. And
nice.
once you go across the pond, it's so expensive. We always say, well, we should do something else as well. And so this time it was this trip. All of the birds were recorded in eBird, along with many of the photographs. They're there under both Javier's and my name. He was really good at recording. Uh, he's a great conservationist as well as a superb photographer and a top-notch guide.
Great, thanks.
Right. Thank you.
We have one last presentation.